All right, guys, welcome to our next review unit over the early republic, or the first 5 presidents of the United States. So far where we're at, we've talked about how America became a nation. We won our independence from Great Britain, and then we created our own constitution, or our own form of government. Now it's time to see how that government is going to work. Okay, our first president, of course, was George Washington. Remember, he was commander of the American or Patriot forces during the Revolution. He was president or leader at the Constitutional Convention. He was our first president, and he set many of the precedents that are still in effect today. Remember, precedents are like traditions. One of the traditions he set was serving 2 terms. Now, Washington, of course, since he was the first president, faced many problems that no one had ever faced before. The first problem he faced was how to maintain national security or keep our country safe. He needed to figure out how to create and use a military. He used complete force to stop the Whiskey Rebellion, which was a rebellion over a tax placed on whiskey. Many farmers tried to rebel against the government, but he put this down with his national army. He also faced the problem of creating an economic system. He helped Alexander Hamilton create the National Bank to collect money and pay off debt. Hamilton wanted to create a national economic system, not separate state economies. He wanted us to all have one money. We didn't want to rely on different monies from different states. And we wanted to be able to pay off our debts and collect money as a country, not as individual states. Another problem he faced was establishing the court system. The only court that the Constitution set up was the Supreme Court. And so with the Federal Judiciary Act of 1789, he created a modern court system that had lower courts as well, not just a Supreme Court. Another problem he faced was defining the central government. He established a cabinet in order to be his advisors. These people helped give him advice on different situations that came up. They were each experts in their own area. We had cabinet members such as Secretary of War, Secretary of State, and others to help us define our national government. Another problem, and the last problem he faced, was developing foreign policies. Remember, foreign means from another country. And so Washington strived for America to stay neutral in all events, so the country would not be dragged into war. And so when you think of Washington, think about staying neutral. He did not want to get involved in any other country's problems. Now, when Washington made his farewell address, or the speech he makes when he leaves office, he gave us some advice. The first piece of advice he said was, like we just said, stay neutral. Do not ally yourself with other foreign countries because it will likely turn out bad for you. You will probably be dragged into war, and it will be expensive and costly. So his advice was to stay neutral as much as possible. Also, he warned against political parties. This is where we have different political parties like we have today, such as the Democrats and Republicans, and it basically splits your country in half. Some people are Democrats, some are Republicans, and not everybody works together. Another piece of advice he gave was to keep religion as a part of government. Religious morals are good to have in a leader, but do not let these make decisions for your country, he said. He also said, stay united. Do not let any issue or people split your country. And then finally, he said, stay out of debt as much as possible. If you owe other people money, it causes problems. Have we followed his advice? I would say probably not. Since we're in debt, we have political parties. Before the Civil War, our country was very split, and we haven't always remained neutral. So he gave good advice, but we did not always listen to the advice that he gave. The first election following Washington's retirement, political parties formed. Here are our first 2 political parties. It was the Democratic Republicans on one side and the Federalists on the other. Now, the Democratic Republicans were mainly from the South. And remember, the South believes in a weak national government, a strict interpretation of the Constitution, meaning that if it's not said in the Constitution, you should not be allowed to do it. The South and the Democratic Republicans opposed the National Bank because they thought it only served the wealthy. They also opposed or disliked tariffs because they made goods cost more. In addition, the Democratic Republicans and Southerners believed in an agricultural-based economy. They believed the country should make their money from farming. And their major leaders were Thomas Jefferson and James Madison, who would eventually become presidents as well. Now, the Federalists were mainly from the North. Remember, federal means national. So the Federalists believed in a strong national government. They believed in a loose interpretation of the Constitution, meaning that if the Constitution says something, you can probably take it out of context and do something that the Constitution doesn't say. They favored the national bank because it gave lots of loans to factories in the North. So it was very favorable to the North. They also favored tariffs because it made foreign products more expensive and made people want to buy products from the northern factories. The Federalists or Northerners believed in a manufacturing-based economy, meaning an economy that produces things in factories. Their major leaders were John Adams, our second president, and Alexander Hamilton, the man who made the national bank. Okay, our second president was John Adams. During his presidency, the French began attacking American ships. Adams sent delegates to France to demand it stopped. And instead, the French demanded a bribe. Remember, later this became known as the XYZ affair and almost caused a war. So here's America's response to the XYZ affair. They laid out the Alien and Sedition Acts. Congress said, no longer can we have citizens becoming citizens so fast. We need to have longer wait times, and immigrants could be jailed or sent out of the country for complaining about the government. So basically, these made it harder to become a citizen, and if you weren't a citizen, you didn't get all of the rights guaranteed to us in the Bill of Rights, especially the First Amendment. And his foreign policy was to remain neutral. Our third president was Thomas Jefferson. Important to remember, he wrote the Declaration of Independence in 1776. He was the first Democratic Republican president. So obviously he believed in agricultural-based economies. He believed in helping the South. In 1803, he wanted to expand the size of America in order for there to become more farmers. So he made the Louisiana Purchase, which doubled the size of the United States overnight. And then remember, Jefferson sent Lewis and Clark to explore the new territory. If you can see there on your map, the Louisiana Purchase extended from the Mississippi River to the Rocky Mountains. It was the middle part of the United States. Under Thomas Jefferson, we placed an embargo act that shut down trade between the United States and foreign countries. Now, this really hurt the economy, but a positive is it helped spur the Industrial Revolution. The Embargo Act was created because British kept stopping and attacking U.S. ships. So we just said, we are no longer going to ship goods outside of our country. So with this came the advent of factories in the United States. Factories started popping up everywhere because no longer could we rely on foreign countries to get goods to the United States. And again, Thomas Jefferson's foreign policy was neutrality. Our fourth president was James Madison. Okay, he was the father of the Constitution, and he was the president of America during the War of 1812. He tried to follow Washington's advice and stay neutral, but he was forced into war by the British. The War of 1812. Here are the causes. The main cause was the impressment of U.S. sailors, meaning the British would stop our ships and force our sailors to join in their fight against the French. They also interfered with our shipping. Trade was slowed or stopped by British ships. And one of the main reasons the war started is because Congress has to approve any war. Well, in Congress, we had this group called the War Hawks. And this was a group of politicians in Congress that wanted to force America into war. So they persuaded many people in Congress to go to war with Britain. And then eventually, the act passed to go to war. The events of the war. First of all, Washington, D.C. was burned down. The Capitol was burned down. But remember, Dolly Madison, the wife of President James Madison, saved many things from the White House, including the portrait of Washington. After this war, we would build an entirely new White House since the previous one was burned down. At the Battle of Fort McHenry, after the battle was done, Francis Scott Key, a lawyer, was captured, and he watched the battle happen. While he was watching, he was inspired to write the Star-Spangled Banner, which, remember, is our national anthem. At the Battle of New Orleans, the war was actually over at this time. But the soldiers at this battle did not get the message until the battle had already occurred. And at this battle, Andrew Jackson becomes a hero by defeating the British. And then the treaty that ended the war was the Treaty of Ghent. This restored both countries to pre-war status, and no one actually won this war. The effects from the War of 1812. Well, the U.S. became independent because we started making our own goods. This is when industrialization really started in the United States. Remember, we could no longer get our goods from foreign countries due to the Embargo Act, so now we started making our own. Also, another effect is the U.S. was seen as powerful by other nations at this time. Again, we didn't lose to Britain for the second time, who was the most powerful country in the world. So this raised our status in the world as being more powerful and more independent. And this brought about an era of good feelings or national pride. Everybody was proud to be an American at this time. And our fifth president and the last president in this unit was James Monroe. Now remember, the big thing that Monroe did was created the Monroe Doctrine. This told all foreign countries to stay out of North America and South America. The United States was now going to be the protector of these areas. Basically, we wanted Europe to stop coming over here, stop exploring and colonizing. We are no longer the New World. We are now a group of nations that are independent from Europe. And another thing that happened under Monroe is the United States purchased Florida from Spain. This was an attempt to get Spain out of the United States. And so we purchased Florida, and this is when Florida became a part of the United States. And the treaty that this happened under was called the Adams-Onis Treaty. Okay, key vocabulary for the unit. Protective tariff. Remember, a protective tariff is a tax on foreign goods. The North was an industrial economy. Remember, that's where our factories were. They liked tariffs because it made prices for their goods cheaper than foreign goods. This tax on the foreign goods made them so much more expensive than American-made products that people started buying products from our factories. So it produced more jobs in the North, and more factories started popping up because of the tariffs. The South, remember, was an agricultural economy, so they didn't really care about factories. They disliked the tariffs because they wanted to buy the cheapest goods, which were from Europe. The tariffs raised the prices of these goods. Europe did not buy as much cotton and crops from the South because of the high tariffs. So as you see, the protective tariffs were good for the North, but bad for the South. And another key vocabulary term, judicial review. This originated from a Supreme Court ruling in the court case of Marbury versus Madison. So this is where we can now go to the Supreme Court to determine if laws and actions go against the Constitution or are constitutional. An example, Congress creates a law which states that only military officials can carry guns in the United States. Is this constitutional or unconstitutional? Well, if we had to decide, it would be unconstitutional because the Second Amendment gives us all the rights as citizens to carry guns. This would be an example of judicial review. Another example, the president declares war on Russia. Is this action constitutional or unconstitutional? This act would be unconstitutional because only Congress can declare war. And so judicial review is where the Supreme Court rules on laws and actions to decide if they are constitutional or unconstitutional. If they are deemed to be unconstitutional, then the law would be thrown out or the action would not be permitted. Okay, this is it for this review unit. When you are done, you need to go ahead and grab your notes and take the quiz over the early republic. See you next time.